Hello and welcome to today's briefing on Horizon 2020 funding opportunities for 5G projects. My name is Eleanor Brash. I am Head of Marketing at Cambridge Wireless, the lead partner in the UK 5G Innovation Network. We work alongside the TM Forum and the KTN, who are kindly delivering this webinar and hosting us today. UK 5G is the innovation network dedicated to the research and commercial application of 5G in the UK. We work with businesses, universities and local and national governments to share what they're doing and connect people working in this area. If you are interested in 5G, I'd strongly suggest that you visit our website www.uk5g.org and register to stay up to date with all the latest opportunities on 5G in the UK. You can also share what you're doing, all the stories and success projects that you've got online once you've registered. Today, to talk to you about Horizon 2020 funding, we've got a couple of experts who will share their knowledge with you. I'm joined by Stafford Lloyd from Innovate UK and Mythri Hunukumbure from Samsung. They will give you an overview on the UK and EU and what 5G funding projects are currently available. And Mythri will talk to you about his experience of working with Horizon 2020 funding to date. So, if you've got any questions as we're going through, we're going to deal with them after the talks. Just sign in on YouTube and type your questions into the comment bar. We'll get to them after Mythri's talk. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Stafford, who will start with a talk on the UK and EU's funding relationship. Over to you, Stafford.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And I suppose I feel like I should start by saying thank you for expressing an interest and taking the time to join us today, and for still showing interest and enthusiasm for European funding during these interesting times that we live in. So I'm the Horizon 2020 National Contact Point for ICT, and I'll be talking to you about the 5G opportunities in the ICT work programme today. So I'm not going to assume any prior knowledge of who I work for or what I do, so to start with the basics. So I'm from Innovate UK, and we are the UK government's innovation funding agency. We are part of UK Research Innovation. You might have noticed today that we've just re-announced our whole branding as a whole organisation. And for a pithy characterisation of what we broadly do, if you imagine that research is the process of turning money into knowledge, we see innovation as turning that knowledge back into money. And we do that through running grant competitions, as I'm sure you're aware of, and doing other things like innovation loans. Another part of our activity is to support networking organisations like the Knowledge Transfer Network and the Enterprise Europe Network, and also to encourage international collaboration, which is where my role kind of fits into the picture. So to those of you who aren't aware of what Horizon 2020 is, so it's basically the European Union's flagship research innovation funding programme. It works in step with the multi-annual financial framework, so it started in 2014, it will end next year, hence the name, Horizon 2020. And as you can see, there's a fair amount of money available across the whole 7 years and various programmes. There's knocking on 80 billion. And it has three principal aims that structure the three main pillars of Horizon 2020. So there's building and developing the excellent research base we have in Europe and in the UK. So I cover what's called Future Emerging Technologies within that, which is a bottom-up programme focused on radical new ideas. There's the industrial leadership pillar, which is broadly speaking about increasing the industrial competitiveness of European industry across various different sectors, one of them obviously being ICT and 5G, with quite a strong focus on digitising European industry, as we call it. And then there's also the societal challenges element, structured across 7 different areas from health to security. And I say this because it's important to bear in mind these high-level objectives, because as you're developing your proposals and ideas, this is what ultimately the European Commission is trying to achieve. So you need to think about how you develop things like excellent science by improving the state of the art, or help digitise European industry. And the main message I really want to get across is this is about large-scale collaborative research innovation. It is fundamentally collaborative. You need minimum 3 partners from different member states or associated countries. Projects are typically much longer than, like, for example, Innovate UK project can take up to 3 or 4 years. The budgets are bigger, the expected impact's bigger, but also it can be much more rewarding. It can open new markets, supply chains, collaborations with different partners. So everything about it to me feels bigger. So and I accept it can be quite hard to access for that reason, but it can also be quite rewarding. So my job as a national contact point is to basically encourage participation and support participation in the programme across the whole life cycle of a project. So that starts with the role I do in supporting our mother department, which is the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, in forming policies and then using those to influence what comes through the work programme, which is about 20% of my time. I go to Brussels, sit in meetings, things like that. About 80% of my time, the lion's share, is doing things like this. So it's meeting people or communicating to people about the opportunities that are coming up, who have interesting ideas and looking for funding to develop those ideas and get them to market or further up the technology readiness scale. And we also offer support to in-flight projects. Some of those can be quite technical nature, so I do have a colleague called Stephen Alexander who looks after legal and financial aspects, and who, if it's not a basic inquiry, I can pass you on to if you're running a project and you have some issues about your grant agreement or something related to that. But broadly speaking, that's what I do. In a nutshell, I'm here to help across all aspects of Horizon 2020, and I'll do everything but write the proposal for you. So obvious element in the room with EU funding is Brexit. It's become an inevitable part of what I do, and I suppose the key message I want to get across, but if you ignore everything else but just focus on Horizon 2020, really there's no need to panic. Whatever happens, we can participate and get funding. So the key things to consider are is that if we cease to become a member state or associated country, obviously we won't be one of the 3 countries represented within the consortium to meet basic eligibility. So our current recommendation is, if you can, include 4. And there's still the aim of the programme is to develop impact within Europe. So that doesn't mean you can't do things in the UK and have impact in the UK, but you also need to demonstrate how this is adding value to the broader European picture, I suppose. So just bear those things in mind. There's a link to the latest government guidance, which I'm going to take you through a very high level now. So I'm sure some of you have some questions. So some of you may remember something called a withdrawal agreement. So that's still, I suppose, in play. And the current agreement, or the last agreement, I suppose, that was formally agreed by the previous government, basically said that for the purposes of Horizon 2020 participation, everything will continue as normal until the end of 2020. And pretty much the only thing that will change is that I may lose my vote on the programme committee that I sit on in Brussels. But then you might ask, well, what about no deal? Which, if you believe our politicians, is maybe still a potential outcome. So basically, one of the themes of Horizon 2020 from the beginning has been openness to the world. So there are rules within the regulations and the rules of participation that say there's no problem with you participating if you're from what will be called a third country, which is what would be, for those purposes, if we leave with no deal, whenever that might be. What this basically means is that we can participate. There's certain areas that are closed to us. This is mainly the mono beneficiary schemes, things like SME instrument, some ERC grants, space and security projects that have a strong security theme, we might not be able to access, and multi-beneficiary schemes like fast track to innovation, which can link to SMEs. But for the most part of the work programs, we can participate as a third country. We can continue to coordinate projects and distribute EU funds. But the key difference is that we can't automatically receive EU funding. So that's why the UK government has put in place what we call our underwrite guarantee and the guarantee extension. What that basically says is that if you submit a proposal and you are successful any time between now and the end of 2020, and you're eligible to participate as a third country, the UK government will pay for your share of the costs within that consortium. If you want to get a bit more technical, what's called Article 9 of the grant agreement will come into force. This is called implementation of action tasks by beneficiaries not receiving EU funding. And the main message within this, particularly for developing proposals, is that the process will largely stay the same. So I'm going to go through the different scenarios with no deal only in mind about how this might play out. So if you're submitting an application after we've left the European Union, which for these calls we're going to go through today would be the case, it will be covered by the UK government guarantee extension. And in terms of proposal, basically everything is as normal, but within your budget column, where it says requested EC budget, you will put 0. It's really that simple. If your proposal is evaluated as successful, the UK government guarantee will kick in during the grant preparation phase. And as I said at the beginning, you just need to make sure you meet basic eligibility and deliver deliver impact in the EU. So basically write a good proposal, which if you get funded, you will have done. If you submit an application pre-exit and it's successful after exit, this will be covered by the guarantee. And basically the advice is prepare the proposal as per the UK status on the deadline date. So try not to get caught up in if, buts, maybes. The eligibility will be unchanged at the point of application, as long as basic criteria is met, it will be evaluated. And then depending on what the situation is and the timings, either your Article 9 will come into play while you're developing the grant agreement, or there'll be a change to the grant agreement that is being in place. But there's no reason why you can't participate and get funded. It'll be covered by the underwrite. And the underwrite, the main reason why it's there really is to cover funding for projects that are ongoing. And there'll be a transfer process basically where a line will be drawn on how much money has come from the EU. You'll get a letter that says this is how much money I need from the UK government to finish my project, and you basically bring that letter to UKRI, the portals on the link that I've just given you on the previous slide, and you can continue with your project hopefully largely as normal. So this all assumes particularly no deal, that there's no what we call accommodations from the EU. And given we're quite close to the end of the programme, there has been the odd informal word that they might just kind of come to a side agreement that says we can basically just continue till the end, given it's so close. And I suppose the last thing I'd just like to say is we do understand that it's difficult, particularly when engaging with people in Europe, to get the message across, given all the noise around Brexit, that there's no technical reason why we can't continue to participate and get funded. So let's just try the best we can to, I suppose, put a brave face on it and continue if you're interested in these funding opportunities. As I mentioned, Stephen Alexander earlier, so he's our national contact point for legal and financial, and he knows the depth of any questions that you may have on this matter. So if you have any Brexit-related questions, I'd encourage you to speak to Stephen first. And I'll be very surprised if he can't give you a satisfactory answer to your questions. So enough about Brexit. You can ask some questions later if you would like, but now let's get, I suppose, onto the real substance of today's presentation, which is the funding opportunities that are available between now and the end of 2020 in the area of 5G. I recognise that Horizon 2020 can be more difficult to engage in for new people and a bit complicated, and it's all, as I said, it's all a bit bigger. So I like to try and break it down quite simply into the terms of the process about how you might go about submitting a proposal and ultimately delivering a project. And it really starts with finding a call, which is the focus of today, and looking at the core text and thinking about, well, does this resonate really with what I'm trying to achieve as an organisation? And it's that alignment between what the European Commission is trying to achieve through their funding objectives and what you're trying to achieve as a business or as a research organisation or as a university, and really finding that kind of the match between the need and what you're trying to do as well. And that's the starting point. And once you've got that kind of resonance, then it's a case of finding partners, building your consortia, then hopefully going through the process of submitting a proposal, and then ultimately, hopefully if you're successful, delivering your project and the impact that the EU are looking for through that project, which is really what it's all about. So today's webinar really focuses on, I'm going to give you some information about what the calls are looking for, so hopefully it resonates with some of you and what you're trying to achieve, so we can start you on this process of getting towards consortia, proposals and delivering projects. To give you a flavour of 5G in a picture, so it's being led through what's called the public-private partnership, the 5G PPP. So that's where basically the Commission collaborates with a group of private companies to help set the research agenda for 5G within Europe. We're now in what's called phase 3 of the PPP. I've got plenty of background information on this, which I'm going to go through, I can share. So if you want some of that, you can always contact us and find out more. And this picture gets shared a lot, and this is really the final phase in Horizon 2020. And it breaks down into 4 main elements. So there's the connected cars aspect, there's the long-term evolution, the phase 3B, which is integrated verification trials on radio networking applications, and the innovation for verticals. And how this is structured in terms of the current calls that I'm going to go through. So there's basically a budget of 182 million euros split between 4 topics. There's ICT 41, which is innovation for verticals and third-party services. IC 42, which is the core technologies innovation. IC 52, which is smart connectivity on 5G. And a link call called DC ICT 09, which is boosting rural economies through cross-sector digital service platforms. So all these open on 19th of November, so you've got plenty of time to get going, and they close 22nd of April next year, with the exception of ICT 42, the 5G core technologies innovation, which closes 16th of January, so you've got a little bit less time to be prepared for that one if you're interested. There are some other opportunities that I'm going to touch on in less detail. The Connected Automotive Mobility Call, which closes in November, so it's really getting a bit too late now to submit for that one, but it's not too late, but it's getting borderline. There's some cascade funding, which I'll give you more information about. And also, as the European Commission always says, the work programme is the sole authority to protect. So this is a summary of information to try and get you interested. And really, I'm hoping this will be a start of a process to help you learn more and get going on the funding journey, really. So I'm going to go through these in a bit more detail, starting with ICT 41, which is innovations for verticals of third-party services. So this is innovation action, so looking at higher TRLs, 4 to 6 million euro projects with a 49 million euro budget. So you say that roughly you're looking at funding 8 projects. And the focus of this one in terms of the challenge is really on what they call, or what are defined as virtual network functions that software networks have the ability to provide, that may be changed across several domains to create network applications tailored to requirements of specific tenants. And what they're really looking for is open platforms that provide access to the network resources, which can then be used to develop net apps supporting requirements to develop some specific vertical sectors. So building on that, they're looking for these open platforms, experimentation facilities, to provide the enhanced experimentation infrastructures, on top of which experimenters, in particular SMEs, they have the opportunity to test their net apps to specific vertical use cases. They're looking for open source repositories for wide use and towards standard development. And an example, this is not exhaustive, but example of some vertical use cases they're looking people to focus on are automotive mobility, smart factories, industry 4.0, energy, healthcare, and media. So going into the expected impact, so this is the important bit. This is ultimately what are the Commission looking for you to deliver through a project. So this is what you really need to evidence you can do through your proposal. So the first one is testing and validation of NetApp solutions on top of a 5G virtualized experimental environment. These NetApps must secure interoperability beyond vendor-specific implementation across multiple domains with the availability of standard or reference implementations. Looking for open source repositories of network applications that can be further leveraged by other developers. Creation of third-party markets for startups and SMEs. So look at quite a high bar in terms of SME engagement. So within your consortium, 50% of SMEs are targeted in this action. There's a relevant KPI from the 5G PPP, which is the service creation time in minutes. And also looking for appropriate transfer towards an incubator or startup with projects in follow-up actions. So that's basically what they're looking for you to deliver. And that is useful, that really helps to define what your consortium may look like in terms of different stakeholders. So what they don't want is experimentation facilities that are not sufficiently open or rich in terms of virtual network functions to attract third parties or test net apps for specific vertical sectors. As I said, there's a strong emphasis on SMEs, so solutions that will clearly not be taken up by SMEs or startups. In terms of the topic development, so it can be quite handy sometimes to look at what's come in the past, to look at who might be involved and what they're kind of expecting in terms of the future. So this is a new topic, but it leverages 5G enabling technologies and systems developed within or out of the 5G PPP phases 1, 2, and 3. Extending innovation to software innovations with low market entry barriers that can be leveraged by SMEs and new actors. And there's means of accessing the project portfolio that I can help you as an SME. as an NCP. The kind of actors they're looking for are software development companies, SMEs, research centres, communication research departments in universities, industries, etc. So that's ICT 41. Move on to ICT 42, so this is core technologies innovation. So again, innovation action, so looking at high TRLs, €46 million budget, with a 48 million budget available. So again, they're looking at probably funding around minimum 8 projects. It says at the beginning, this one closes 16th of January, so if you're interested, you need to hurry, really. So the key challenge is really building on the previous R&D investments in the 5G PPP, and really getting these new technologies and hardware devices closer to market. So it really is looking at the high TRL end of the scale and reaping the fruits of the early R&D investments that the European Commission has made in these areas. And when you really digest the work program, ultimately what we're looking for is the integration and validation of target components into an overall architecture representing a subject of 5G network functions. The components and I suppose the building blocks they're looking for are primarily hardware based and include phase array antennas, array processors, millimeter wave devices, photonic based devices, baseband platforms, low cost access point terminals, and other new generation of 5G terminals. And a specific emphasis will put on new types of IoT devices demonstrating use of 5G functionalities addressing requirements of verticals. In terms of expected impact from this one, so it supports the emergence of European offer for new 5G core technologies at TRL 7 or beyond. So it's really looking at the high TRL end of the scale. If you want more information on TRLs and what they mean, again, I can help you explore that and understand what the European Commission are looking for. Supports the emergence of new actors in the related markets, creation of high-tech startups or of new business opportunities for established SMEs, and again, looking at that strong SME participation. So what they don't want is R&R components not related to 5G connectivity and actions that do not open up strong SME opportunities. Again, it's a new topic, but it's leveraging on, as I said at the beginning, really looking to build on the enabling technology and systems that are developed in previous funding rounds and phases of 5G PPP, extending the innovation to their application at hardware level for devices, terminals, network equipment. And again, we can help you with the project portfolio. So they're looking for hardware development companies, SMEs and research centres involved in this area. Again, research departments, universities, industries is normal. So moving on to the final main topic in the, I suppose, main work programme, so which is beyond 5G. And this really is the main, I suppose, bridge to Horizon Europe, which is the next framework programme that beyond Horizon 2020. It starts in 2021. It's still kind of going through discussion in the European Commission at the moment. And this topic really is focused on building that bridge between the two programmes, the bridge to further 5G research. It's quite a broad scope in terms of size of projects, so 5 to 12 million, but a big budget available, so 55 million. And they really want to place an emphasis on the strong structural effects across a large set of key industry stakeholders and pragmatic impacts with future European actions in the domain of smart networking services may target the high budget range. So they're really looking at people who can help develop that link to the future programme. And also, so there is a lot of talk about the new Smart Networking Services Partnership, which will build on the 5G PPP. If you want some information on that, I've been involved in some European meetings that have touched on it, so I can give you that if you're interested. And really, the future research challenges might be expected to go well beyond the 5G capabilities available in 2020. To prepare smart connectivity systems as a platform for a next generation internet, supporting highly flexible connectivity infrastructure that can dynamically adapt to innovative applications whilst facilitating user data control, innovation friendly environments and comply with relevant legislation. And they really place a strong emphasis on a full value chain approach. And the picture that I've seen in quite a lot of EU meetings is this, again, which is able to be shared. Really emphasises the value chain approach, connecting the enabling emerging devices, I suppose, at the bottom, and the services and applications that can be built on top of I suppose, the network that builds the blocks in between, and really creating this new connected and service-orientated ecosystem, which is the phrase they like to use in Europe. So that's the real kind of emphasis of this topic in terms of the scope. They're looking at long-term transformation of networks into distributed smart connectivity platform with high integration with edge computing and storage resources. Looking at enabling novel interaction between human and digital systems based on new terminal types. For example, cars, doors, mirrors, etc. So it's touching on Internet of Things quite strongly. Proposals may focus on one or more of the following subtopics or will bridge towards preparing evolution paths for R&I and smart networks and services in future programs. So there's infinite network capacity, imperceptible latencies, connecting massive amount of things and systems, developing new architectures, protocols and technologies, e.g. AI for adaptive networks, and the multi-tenant perpetual protection-based security, privacy and trust mechanisms with innovative technologies, for example, distributed ledger technologies. So you may focus on one or more of those, and I think that's probably literally what they mean. In terms of the expected impact, they're looking at smart connectivity technologies for platforms integrating ubiquitous connectivity, storage and computing resources, opening for new services and business models, smart connectivity platforms towards perceived zero latency, and network scalability towards a high number of resource-constrained IoT devices, the characterization and availability of secure and trusted environments, software-based multi-virtualized networks, innovative radio spectrum use, and etc. I don't think I'll bore you with the rest, but they're there, they're in the work program, and obviously some of these will be aligned with the subtopics that you focus on, so you might not be expected to deliver all of these depending on your focus area within the work program. So what they don't want, so I suppose is implicit within the longer term objective, they don't want short-term R&I without an ambitious outlook. And no one-off proposals that won't follow up on or won't have the potential to follow up in the next multi-annual financial framework, so Horizon Europe. Technologies locked to a specific business model, or actions which do not clearly focus on European opportunities and actors. So this again is a new topic, but may piggyback on previous topics in the 5G PPP, notably ICT 09, EU J02 and ICT 20. Again, project portfolios available, and I suppose the normal stakeholders expected to be involved, but particularly R&I centres with a visionary role compared to previous phases, and large-scale framing initiatives that could be strongly industry-driven. So on to the final topic, which is the platforms call. So the way platforms have been described to me by project officers of the European Commission is basically an operating system for a large piece of infrastructure, whether it's a farm, a hospital, a factory. But here they're looking at rural communities, which sounds quite ambitious. And in my mind, this actually complements current activities in the UK around, I'm sure also we've heard of the Rural Connected Communities project. So this might give you an opportunity to leverage activities being funded within that programme. So looking at two projects, 15 million each, so they're very large. But really, I suppose similar to Rural Connected Communities, there's various challenges associated with rural areas with job creation, attracting people, creation of services, making sure they don't get left behind in terms of increasing connectivity and digitisation, and typical challenges around limited interoperability. And really what they're looking for is to create a marketplace for services and applications for people living in rural areas. So the scope of this, so the proposal is expected to develop and demonstrate cost-efficient and flexible cross-domain applications through large-scale pilots, addressing all of the following aspects: the integration of data across different platforms for efficient service provision, where appropriate based on artificial intelligence, developing an open marketplace for cross-cutting services, reference implementations, so proof of concepts, demonstrators, developing pilot demonstrating benefits in rural areas, and creating innovative ecosystems for novel applications. So looking short, an open API-based interoperable and federated IoT architecture, and include a reference implementation supporting flexible integration of heterogeneous devices, as well as addressing things like interoperability, providing a platform for integrating smart objects and associated markets and services, and ultimately meeting the needs of end users. So speaking of end users, so pilots could be developed in the following application areas. This is not exhaustive, this is just illustrative. So public services, energy, autonomous mobility, logistics, education, tourism, health and care. And there's also an expectation that it builds strongly on what's called the smart villages concept. And really, in my interpretation, what they're looking for here is participatory approaches to addressing local challenges is what they're really looking to do through these cross-sector digital service platforms. In terms of the expected impact, so looking at validation of these platforms illustrated by an increase of cross-cutting application services, demonstrate and show cross-sectoral platforms and their interoperability, demonstrate the benefits of data sharing, exploration and validation of new industry and business processes, innovative business models, overcoming ultimately the digital divide between rural and urban areas and how you can contribute to that, and demonstrating the potential by providing connectivity and digitalisation in rural areas. And ultimately, I suppose, the end goal is to improve the quality of life in rural areas and foster the innovation ecosystem in these areas. So these are the specific impacts for this particular call, but the platforms, this is one of a number of platform topics that have run, and there are some generic impacts that apply to all of those. So if you want help digging into those and the broader aspects of the work programme related to platforms, then that's something I can help you with. So I suppose then moving on to the next steps, if some of this is interesting for you. So the key challenge which most people come across is how do they find partners? So the NCP network across Europe that I'm part of for ICT NCPs is called Idealist. So you've got the website there, idealist.eu, and they have something called a partner search tool that basically breaks it down in terms of the 5 different ways you can help find partners for your proposal and collaboration. So there's obviously the funding and tenders portal, which we've provided a link through there. There's attending brokerage events and information days and webinars, things like this, which is also helpful. So I've provided there a link to the events pages on the Digital Single Market website, where you'll be able to look at what's going on in the 5G area. And then also connected to your related digital innovation ecosystem and stakeholder groups. So this is really where the 5G PPP comes in, and things like the NetWorld 2020 European Technology Platform. And there's also the Enterprise Europe Network, which is obviously SME focused, but if you're looking for SMEs, might be a good organisation to engage with, because their main role is really partnering across Europe and the wider world. That's partner search. So I'm going to touch a bit on cascade funding. So these are basically calls within projects. So the EU have recognised that Horizon 2020 can be difficult to access, particularly for SMEs. So they encourage projects to run their own little calls. You can get a reasonable amount of money, and it's usually much shorter projects that are much easier to access. And one example of this is Fed 45 Plus, which is a project that's ongoing. And they have a continuous call for experimenters, and you can get up to 60,000 euros. And they're looking for experiments that break the boundaries of different test beds or domains across wireless, 5G, wired, open flow, cloud computing, smart cities, etc. So there are UK people involved in this as well. So there's contact there, and there are other opportunities available. So there's a link there to the Cascade funding part of the funding and tenders portal. And the final bit, so the connected autonomous vehicles calls to ICT 53. So this, say the deadline's in a month. I have heard of people getting involved in calls with that kind of time scale, but it can be a challenge. It's quite rare. These innovation actions, so 7 to 10 million euro projects with 30 million budget. And the broad scope for this is the validating of 5G, the current release of it in a CAM context, taking into account the kind of also the wider objectives to develop connected autonomous mobility within Europe. And I suppose the key challenge for us in the UK is these projects are expected to do their validations, implementations within predefined corridors, which were defined in 2018. So you're probably not surprised to hear that none of these stretch into the UK. But if you're a UK technology provider, there's nothing wrong with you getting involved and using this as potentially a route to access the European market. So I have also done some work to promote this through the KTN earlier this year. and their connected autonomous mobility activities. So again, if you want help connecting in this space, that's something we can do. So final bits of information. So unfortunately, the main event for finding partners in the ICT was held in Helsinki just under a month ago. So you've missed it, unfortunately, but I've provided a link there to the 5G elements that includes all the information the Commission gave, as well as pitches from people who are interested in the calls. If you want to understand the broader, I suppose, picture of 5G within Europe, I'd encourage you to dig into a lot of the background. Really gives you a flavour of what they're trying to achieve, which gives you a much better sense of whether or not your idea aligns with what you think they're looking for. So you've got the 5G Action Plan for Europe, the European 5G Observatory, which has a much broader scope looking internationally. And then there's also a direct link there to the 5G PPP, who obviously drive a lot of the strategic research agenda within Europe. So that's it. So just thanks again for your time and attention. There are my contact details. Feel free to reach out, and I'll be more than happy to hear from all of you about how I can help. And just the last note, if you're joining this without having registered, so just by clicking on the YouTube link, and you would like these slides after the event, then there's an email address for Natalie Withenshaw at the KTN. It's provided on that page, so just email Natalie and she will send you the slides. So that's enough from me, and I'm going to head over to, actually, Eleanor's going to do the transfer. So
yep. Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stafford, for that overview of funding opportunities for 5G projects available with Horizon 2020, and the reassurance that no matter what happens with Brexit, UK organisations can continue to participate in Horizon 2020 projects. We're going to move next to Mythri from Samsung, but before we do so, I just want to remind everyone that we'll be handling questions after Mythri has spoken. But if you do have any questions, you can sign into YouTube and write them in the comments box, and that is how we'll be handling them after Mythri speaks. So if at any point you've got anything you want to ask, just write it down in your browser. Okay, over to you, Mythri.
Okay, thank you very much, Eleanor. So I will be talking to you about our experience as Samsung Research UK in participating in these Horizon 2020 projects. And hopefully I can give you some tips and some background which may be useful to you in your future proposals. So first I'll explain to you what Samsung's background in these Horizon 2020 projects. So we have been very active in Horizon 2020 since phase 1, since 2015. So from phase 1 we had 3 projects accepted. Actually we bid for 3 and we got all 3 accepted. We were the coordinator for Millimeter Magic project, and we were sort of a leader, work package leader in METIS 2, and also we participated in Fantastic 5G, which were all very well received in the final reviews. And then in phase 2, which started around mid 2017, again we were active in 3 projects, one 5G, 5G XCast and 5G Monarch. Then moving on to phase 3, which was more about large scale platforms. We had this 5G Winnie project. Then also we had new projects coming in ICT 19, which just started, called 5G Tours. Then in ICT 20, the proposals just got accepted. We have a project called 5G Locus. So you see that over the years we have had significant success in working with other partners and doing proposals and getting these proposals accepted. So briefly, what I can place few nuggets to say how we have benefited from the projects. So from SR UK point of view, we were developing our 5G team along these lines at the time of these projects, and that really enabled us to build our team and also for the team members to develop their expertise in 5G related research and also in project management. And then also this project enabled us to have collaboration opportunities with other industry partners, particularly big players in Europe, and also the leading universities and research institutes in Europe. So that was really a plus for us in these projects. And thirdly, we have this opportunity to introduce 5G products, Samsung products, into these proof of concepts, large scale trials, and also test facilities. So for example, the WINI project will have a test lab built in the BT labs in Ipswich, entirely from Samsung network kit and Samsung devices. So those were the broad benefits we got from these projects. And then I'll move on to the Horizon 2020 project ecosystem. So as I understand, maybe there are a few gaps here and there. But basically, for the ICT domain in Horizon 2020, we have this what we call the PPP, 5G PPP, the private-public partnership between the European Commission and from the private side, the 5G Infrastructure Association. So this develops the widest research framework for the ICT domain, and they would encourage the selected projects to fit within this framework and deliver outcomes to fit within this framework, and sort of aligned to this, or in parallel to this, you have this European Technology Forum called Networld 2020, which develops the research and the research agenda and the vision for the future ICT industry in Europe. But the 5G IA was born out of Network 2020 because legally the Network 2020 didn't have the legal authority to sign this contract or the agreement with European Commission to build the 5G PPP. So because of that, we have the 5G Infrastructure Association born out of the Network 2020. But to participate in 5G or Horizon 2020 projects or even beyond, you don't need to be a member of either 5G PPP or the Network 2020. The project calls are open to everybody, and the proposals are evaluated independently by a set of experts. So you don't need, I'm repeating again, you don't need to be a member of either 5G PPP or Network 2020. Then what happens within 5G PPP, at least within the Horizon 2020, is that 5G PPP leverages the live set of proposals, live set of projects that are going on, so they can harmonize the outcomes and deliver their framework. So the project managers, what we call the project coordinators, are members of the 5G PPP steering board, and the current chair is from SIUK as well. And then we also have the technical board, where the project technical managers are all members of this technical board. And in parallel to that, there are specific working groups which look at specific aspects. For example, there's a spectrum working group, there's a KPI and performance working group. So these working groups look at specific topics and see how the outcomes from the individual projects can be leveraged in these specific areas. So for example, the spectrum working group provides opinion to the ongoing discussions in RSPG and CEPT in Europe. So they are quite active in the spectrum domain in Europe. So like that, there are outcomes coming from the projects which are leveraged within these working groups. So to give you some tips on participation, so I have split this into two parts. One on building a proposal, and secondly on what you do in a project, how do you execute a project. So the proposals are very competitive, so roughly there's about 5 to 8% chance of a proposal getting accepted. Of course it depends on the call itself, but roughly on average it's quite a slim chance. But the proposals contain these three parts on excellence, the impact and implementation. So all proposals have to highlight these factors in the joint proposal. So the excellence needs to highlight how your research or what you are proposing to do in the project will go beyond the state of the art. So that is quite important, and also the impact you create to you plan to create needs to align with what is expected in the expectations in the particular call. So you have to really read through the expectations from the particular call and show that what you are doing will give the right impact with right alignment. And also the implementation plan is very important. It's not just the research idea, not just the impact you plan to create, but also the implementation plan. It needs to be very well thought after, and there should be a very sort of a fluent plan to give tangible outputs. So, talking about tangible outputs from our experience and from the experience in going to these reviews as well, what is expected is, I have put some indicators here, maybe they are in the order of importance in my view. So, they really value if you have 3GPP contributions and HC contributions which can impact the current standardization. And also they value specifically impact towards certain industries like 5G verticals. If you can create impact, if you can create some research nuggets that can be used within these verticals, that is really valued. And also if you produce some software or some channel models, for example, some tangible outputs that can be made widely available. For example, in the Millimeter Magic project, we created this above 6 gigahertz channel model, which was widely used and widely made available, and that was really very well appreciated. And also within the projects, they now expect partners to develop IPR even individually or jointly, and also they value the internal exploitation plans you have within companies. So, particularly if you are a big company, they expect that the research you do don't just sit there, but they are used internally within your business units to create more exploitation and impact. And maybe as a last item, they value if you create white papers and of course research papers. So, those things needs to be highlighted in the proposal, and when you come to build a consortium, from our experience, it is important to have a good mix of large industries, good academic institutes, research institutes from Europe, and also SMEs. SME participation is highly valued, and that is really important to have as a consortium mix. So, as Stafford mentions, these proposals days are a good place to pitch your ideas and find partners for your projects. Then within a project, when you work in a project, you have to really execute and deliver on your implementation plan. So, that is what you have promised to do in the proposal, and that plan needs to be carried out, and the impact you promised should be created, and they measure against your tangible outputs what you have promised, whether you are delivering. So, at least prepare at least to deliver what is in the proposal. Then from the Horizon 2020 experience, the project members are expected to contribute beyond their project. For example, in Horizon 2020, they were expected to contribute to these 5G PPP technical board, the steering board, and also the working groups. And as dissemination, they value the EUCNC very highly. So, it is taken as a key dissemination point for the project outputs. So, to have visible presence in EUCNC for projects when you deliver the projects is really important. So these are my tips for participation, and hope these 3 slides have been useful to you, and I'm of course available to answer any questions, any related questions in this area.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mythri. So some great tips, and really good to hear about the benefits that participation in Horizon 2020 has brought to Samsung as well. So now it's over to you and your questions. My UK 5G colleague, Richard Foggy, has been keeping an eye on what you've been asking, and I'm going to hand it over to him now to have your comments and pass some questions over to our speakers.
Thanks, Eleanor. Indeed, we've got a quite a specific one. Does ICT 41 require the use of ICT 17 testbed facilities like it was in ICT 19? That doesn't appear to be mandated in the call document, but discussion there led on to consideration of, is it wise, are you likely to be more successful if you've worked with partners who've previously been successful and are members of the 5G PPP? Stafford, do you have a view on that, sir?
I'd say I take the call text literally. So I would say it would probably be very helpful if you did build on that, although the Commission, usually they're ambiguous about these things because they don't want to lock down innovation. So if you're doing something which you feel has real benefits, demonstrably above what's already been developed in previous parts of the programme, then I would encourage you to put forward a case for saying, well, actually, we're going to do this and it's better for these reasons. So that's probably why they probably kept it open. So I'd say yes, but unless you feel like you can, there's a better way, would be my initial thought.
Yeah, if I may just add, because of the ICT 17 platform, so we have a platform with BT Labs in Ipswich, but none of the ICT 19 projects which were selected were planning to use this platform for their large scale trials. So there is a bit of an opportunity there, and I know from Samsung as well as from BT, we are actively looking for any partners to come and use this platform. So if you are interested, there is an opportunity to use this platform. This is running till 2019, but if there is funding coming from other projects, it can run even beyond. So there is an opportunity with this platform.
Thanks, Mythri. That's something we should probably blend into the UK 5G mix. Sounds like a useful resource there. Aside from that, thank you, gentlemen. I think your presentations have been most clear, and we have no outstanding questions from the community. Though, of course, you've had Stafford's contact details. You know where the KTN and UK 5G live. So if you do have any questions following this, please do get in touch with us. Eleanor, I think we can hand back to you and wrap things up.
Thanks, Richard. Okay, before we close, I'd just like to say two things. Number one is that whilst today's session has been focused on Horizon 2020 funding opportunities, I'd also like to flag that there are a couple of funding opportunities for 5G projects available from the UK government. So the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport has two calls for funding currently open. One is focused on manufacturing and logistics, and the other one is focused on bringing connectivity to rural areas. All the information that you might need on this is available on the UK 5G website, so if you're interested in finding out more, I'd head over to uk5g.org. Which leads me to my second point, which is just a reminder from what I said earlier. So UK 5G, it's the National Innovation Network dedicated to the promotion of research and the commercial application of 5G in the UK. We've been bringing you this webinar today, and we'd be really excited to have you sign up and join us. We're a community of quickly growing, but over 2,000 experts and enthusiasts in 5G. Join us and you'll stay up to date with all the latest 5G news, and you'll also be able to share all your 5G stories with us and the wider 5G community. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you to our speakers for sharing their expertise, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you.